Greetings, one and all, and welcome back to another podcast with Amoda Maa. My name is Kavi, as you know, and I am delighted to be joined by Amoda again today. Hello, Amoda.
Good afternoon, Kavi.
Today, we are going to be talking about something that's kind of interesting. I think it was prompted by something we saw by the person who's going to be interviewing Amoda. I don't know when, in a few months or something. And so he was asking the question about where are the female teachers in non-duality, or the female teachers throughout history? Where are the female guides and teachers? Are there any? He was asking. He didn't really know of any. So we thought it would be interesting to explore a sort of question: is spirituality dominated by the masculine, and what that might mean? Because it's not just about men and women, it actually goes somewhat deeper than that. So let me just read a little bit, Amoda, of this that we prepared a little bit earlier. When we think of spiritual teachers, we mostly think of enlightened beings such as Jesus or Buddha, or even more contemporary masters, gurus such as Ramana, Papaji, even Osho, Krishnamurti, and in that history, there don't seem to be any real female role models to show us what it is to be an enlightened woman. There are various, I think, models in a saintly kind of way throughout history, but we would be racking our brains to see, to come up with something. So Mother Teresa comes to mind in some way, but she wasn't, ever depicted as an enlightened being, more a saint in some way. So there's usually service orientated and sacrificial in some way. Why is this? So Amoda, where should we start this conversation? As usual, we explore by opening a door to the mystery, and then we just, jiggle along. So,
well, we don't have any preset answers, and I don't think there is a preset answer. Of course, we're just going to explore this and see what wants to come into this conversation. Yes, of course, historically, it is the male figures that appear prominently. If we dig in a little bit, perhaps we'll find that Mary Magdalene was enlightened as such, yes, awakened to the Christ light and embodying that. But none of that has been passed down through history. And we don't remember her as such. We remember her as the fallen woman. So historically, there's a male-dominated culture and a subjugation of women, which still goes on in many cultures. So that's going to be a big factor in it. Historically, women are the homemakers, the mothers, who need to be at home. In some ways, you could say you can't have two masters. If you have children, that is your master. That's the service that you're given to. And there is a truth in that. You can't just abandon your service to children and go to the ashram. So there is a truth in that, but there's also an untruth in that.
The untruth being,
that even mothers can awaken to their true nature. Even mothers can know unconditional love, a love that is not conditional on their children being a certain way or being successful or fulfilling some kind of role. So everything's a doorway to awakening to our true nature as love, as beingness. And as we've moved away from those traditional roles, and as spirituality, or more than spirituality, the genuine search for who we are beyond our culture, our identity, the roles we play, has filtered into the everyday. We don't need to go to the ashram. So we don't need to leave behind the home and the role of parent and the role of breadwinner or the role of homemaker. We can discover who we are within any circumstance or situation. So historically, that has changed. So perhaps that's part of the reason why historically it's been a male-dominated arena. Because the male, the man, could leave home and go to the ashram, go to the meditation center, go to the Zen master and give himself to that, whilst the woman couldn't. That's a very simplistic.
Well, this is some, on a way, in a way, that's a kind of a sort of earthly version. We need to just talk a bit about religion as well, and we also need to talk, within the context of religiosity, about the Father, the Great Father, and what kind of role that plays. I mean, this is as we're speaking, it sort of blows my mind. As the history of the species is sort of the history of the world is somewhat involved in this, in a sense, because when we look at religion, as far as I know, and maybe I'll be corrected, but certainly in the last 2,000 years or so, all of the religions, certainly all the mainstream religions, have had the masculine at the head of it, and what?
Well, again, that seems to be a blend, a mix of historical roles, where men are historically more likely to be educated. Women are not, because they're the homemakers and the mothers. That doesn't need an education as such traditionally. So there's a historical context for that. So then religion is what has become religion has had the seed of looking within, and a more philosophical inquiry that's given rise to what then becomes religion, whether it's Jesus or Moses or Buddha or so-and-so. So it has got a historical context in the roles that have been played, and the possibility or availability for men to have either education, follow a philosophical tradition, look within, and so on, whereas women haven't. So there's that. And then, of course, there's the kind of more psychology of it, or the metaphysical side, which is that the masculine, which has dominated much of humanity's culture, is about authority, or part of it, its dysfunctional side, is about being the authority, the one, like you say, the father figure to whom you submit your authority, which happens in traditional cultures, where the woman submits her authority to the male figurehead, whether it's the father or the husband, and that then seeps into the whole of humanity on all levels, whether we're talking about business or politics or religion. And so power comes into it, authority and power. So there's roles, historical roles, which play a part of it, and what's available for women. And then this whole authority power dynamic, and the stereotypes, again, which are not the true qualities of masculine and feminine, but the stereotypes, which are really sort of a halfway halfway understanding or expression, I should say, of the masculine and feminine, which is, you know, the masculine is going into the world, is more ambitious, has authority, has something to say, perhaps has something of the mind quality,
Yes.
Clarity, knowledge, even philosophical knowledge, whatever. Yeah. Whereas the woman's stereotype in that sort of halfway place is the one that takes care, the one that is more home-centered, body-centered, feeling-centered, takes care of the children, supports the husband, supports the family on that emotional, caring level. These are stereotypes that have become embedded in our culture, in humanity's history, I should say. They're not the whole truth. Yeah, they're not the whole essence of who we are. And then, you know, if we dig deep, we might see that Jesus transcended those stereotypes, in that he had probably what seems to be both qualities. Yeah.
By the time Jesus was interpreted through the scriptures and through the Bible by men, undoubtedly, yeah, it that changed. that seemed to change, yeah. And one wonders to what extent God is the, you know, the manifestation of the masculine.
Well, yes, of course, we
super
have
ego.
Yes, traditional image of God as the father figure, the one who is all-knowing and all seeing,
yeah, exactly,
and all of that.
Yeah, benevolent but wrathful as well.
Yes.
Yeah, full of morality as well.
Yes.
Yeah, full of authority. As long as you do the right thing. But if you don't do the right thing, then you know you've got the wrath of God, which is actually turned into the wrath of man.
Yes.
You know, there are inherent problems in this, because while you're talking, you know, about the qualities of the masculine, which tends to be more mind, yeah, and we know what trouble that can be as spiritual journeyers and teachers that you are and I am. We talk about this mind thing all the time. And so here we are in a situation where mind, in, you know, the masculine mind, which is in everyone, let's face it, has become a tyrannous kind of force. And when you talk about the woman, you're talking about it in traditional ways, but it's inherent in there is there's more of a feeling nature, or there's more of a tendency to take care of and stuff like that. And now we see, I'm sorry to bring it out to contemporary world, but now we see a world, you know, hold on, we're living in a masculine world, right?
Yes, and the thing is that mind in itself is not something that we need to, you know, turn into the devil, because mind itself is a natural function of the human being. It's mind in service to what? Yeah, mind in service to itself, or mind in service to authority, that kind of authority over. That's dangerous, and that's what we see. That's what's out of control in the world. But mind in service to heart is something very beautiful. Of course, you know, we see that, and I know it's controversial, but I don't see controversy in it, and neither do you, Kavi. I don't think in Osho, who was the clarity of mind, the depth of knowledge, philosophical knowledge, the ability to debate on a philosophical level, not from a violent place or an argumentative place, but from clarity and truth. And yet it was in service to the heart. Those who were close to him, perhaps, and those who've been really touched by his fragrance, know that it's all about the heart. It's all about love, ultimately. So mind is in service to that. Then it's something very beautiful. Then it's something very, very beautiful.
So this history is more about the service of mind to itself, which becomes an egoic, if you like, self-fulfillment. Because, you know, part of the thing that I've seen in all of this kind of journey is that the masculine tendency to deny feeling nature, and within that, emotions. Yeah, and we see that in contemporary man. We see it in men all over. They have the emotional body, yeah, the feeling body, but it's almost like too much. So it's, and I'm not saying Jesus in any way. In fact, you know, when I read or perceive inwardly about Jesus, the man, I see something of a very feeling nature. Yeah, in touch with his depth, in touch with that depth. But by the time it ends up, you know, being rolled out as a religion, I see something very, very different. And I see that this is part of the whole escapade. Yeah, and this is part of the escapade of religion, male-dominated religion, which is the kind of pushing away of this feeling nature. And that's a problem.
Yes. So, well, essentially, that's the nature of the problem. Yeah, the inability to surrender to the depth of the heart.
Yes.
To the innermost gentleness. So when we come to that place within ourselves, it's no longer a matter of masculine or feminine.
No.
I think masculine and feminine gets transcended. And then it's like both qualities, there's a kind of inner marriage, and it's that is the fragrance of the light, if you like. I mean, what does that mean for more contemporary teachers who are not caught up in those roles and not caught up in that hierarchy? And I mean really contemporary. Because, you know, in the non-dual world, we see many female teachers, not always as prominent as the male. And I don't really know why. I don't really know why.
I mean, the why is also always a speculation, and people have their speculations about it, because it's, you know, so.
But I think as some of that role playing becomes broken up in our modern day culture, in our contemporary culture, then I think that's when it sort of goes beyond whether it's expressed through a masculine body or a feminine body.
I mean, what's good now, in a way, is all of this is on the table. That's what's great. In the last, I would say, in the last 20 years, yeah, as non-duality, particularly, a non-duality that has this quality of being neither this, neither that, everything and nothing, you know, at the same time. So there is this emergent conversation, you know, that includes this very subject, yeah, because everything is getting turned upside down in the world, yeah, and religion is coming up for grabs, and tyranny is coming up for grabs. And tyranny, you know, so often we don't associate tyranny with anything to do with gender. It's always tyranny. So it's generally, I think 99% is tyranny of the masculine, I have to say. And we see this operating in the Middle East, you know, it's like tyranny of the masculine. And you know, the world is changing, and the world is changing fast. And I think people are, you know, women particularly are sick of some of this tyranny because it's had its run and it's had its longevity.
Yeah,
And I think it's changing. And this is part of that conversation, not this conversation, but this is deep. Yeah, it's true and real.
We do see that tyranny, you know, when we think of cults, whether they're spiritual cults, well, they usually are spiritual cults of some sort, where there is a very hidden but eventually becomes exposed power dynamic of control and abuse of power. I think almost always, and I can think of one example where it's not, and I'm not going to name names, but almost always it's a male at the head of that cult. It's quite difficult, but not impossible, for a woman to abuse power. Quite difficult. It's not impossible. It can happen, and it does happen. But I can only think of one example. Usually it's easier for the man to abuse power. Why? Because of this dynamic of the father figure. Authority is handed to that. Because there is a certain charisma. What is that kind of allure that comes from a masculine in authority? Because, of course, sexual relationships can be easily violated, more easily from a man to a woman than from a woman to a man, although I can think of one example. And so on. So it's usually the male, and if his own, if you like, I mean, there can be true awakening, there can be partial awakening, there can be simply being given some kind of sort of lineage being passed down. Because the man, the masculine in that situation may not have, and usually hasn't, done the personal work to expose, as you said, the feeling nature, the vulnerability and tenderness of the heart, and suppressed emotions. So usually a spiritual teacher, and we're talking about more traditionally, gets handed down a lineage or grabs the lineage in some ways and has not done the personal work. And those hidden shadow realms then get played out in the arena of a hierarchical structure where he is given the authority. So power, ambition, approval, being, you know, elevated, and so on. All those dynamics come into play if they haven't actually been cleansed, from the inside, and so that's a dangerous.
That's dangerous, though. Presumably, that would be also dangerous for a woman.
Yes, absolutely.
So everybody, male or female, is corruptible, or has that potential, whether they're an enlightened being or a non-enlightened being.
Yes, there needs to be a kind of marriage of having done the personal inner work with enlightenment. Although to me, my understanding of enlightenment, or at least how it's experienced here, is that it includes the inner work. They're not separate, but in the traditional sense, you can have enlightenment without any personal work having been done. And that's where it gets dangerous.
I think that's
perhaps the difference today in our really, immediate contemporary culture, if we call that the non-dual arena, to give it some kind of name or terminology, is that most of the awakening has come from having done the inner work.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Not like we just stand up and claim authority, because there's no lineage to get that authority from.
No. Well, that's also where I see that that's what I mean about the last 20 years that have seen this kind of movement. And, it is the whole embodiment movement, let's call it. Yeah. And that embodiment movement is, no, that's not acceptable anymore anywhere, either in religion or in politics, rampant, as it is, and in the spiritual arena, which holds itself to a high standard. But that standard is murky, because as we've seen, and this is not conjecture, this is fact, that lots of teachers in many different fields, areas of spirituality, have been held up as the enlightened being, but their personal behavior has not reflected that. So what does that mean? It's like that drives us crazy. And I think we've had enough, in a sense, as regular people have had enough of that kind of conflict. And we're looking for transparency, and we're looking for teachers who are through and through, let's call it, through and through, top to bottom, all the way. So we can trust something about it, because people have been, I see people have been betrayed historically through religion, that has set this thing up. This external, for a start, the externalization of God. Secondly, the depicting of God as some sort of masculine force.
And then conversely, the depicting of goddess as the flowing, dancing, earth-based Gaia. Which yes, there is a truth in both of those, but the feminine is not just that either.
Well, this speaks to us for a lot, really, because that image still exists. That image is current in a little bit of non-duality. It sort of flows around a little bit.
You mean the goddess image?
I mean that the women are more, exactly that.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, personally,
and which means secondary is secondary, which puts it in a slightly subcategory to the important conversation, which is, what is consciousness?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's probably excuse me, where the female shies away, because she is consciously or unconsciously embodying the more flowing, earth-based, feeling-centered, body-centered, and then mind, or whatever we want to call it, is it's sort of avoided or denied for whatever reason. So to me, it's neither and both. I don't see any differentiation. I don't see a split between mind and body, or even mind and heart. So there's no sort of retracting from directness of expression, or clarity of expression, or in favor of a more body-centered, all compassionate, kind of feel good, and neither is the tenderness of the heart subjugated for the wisdom of mind. To me, they flow in and out of each other, and are very responsive to the needs of the situation. In some situations, circumstances, interactions, it might be the compassionate openness of just being with, which has a tenderness, meeting in the tenderness of the heart, of the intimacy. And in other cases, there might be the the sword of truth or directness that has great value, but not one in favor of the other. It's what's appropriate here now. And so that transcends masculine and feminine.
It does, but it doesn't transcend it as a way of avoiding it, which one can be a little bit hoodwinked sometimes by the idea or the word transcendence, which is to go beyond it. I know what I just want to clarify that actually means inclusive in that sense. It's a very inclusive thing, and I just have to say that you're articulate. There are a few women around now in the non-duality scene, and I think they're speaking with the same kind of clarity of mind as you do, as a woman. It's not to the exclusion of the feeling nature, if you like, but actually inclusive of it, but still able to speak to the quality of mind that actually is required nowadays still. But also I do see that there are some masculine teachers, a few, who are teaching in the contemporary world, who also have the capacity and speaking to their soft heart as well. And when it's right, it's absolutely, that's where we're at. That's what's needed.
Yes, absolutely.
So you were going to say something before. I think I rudely interrupted you. Was that?
No, I don't actually remember what that is. I think perhaps just to say, I think it's relevant to this conversation, is that there's also a sort of another dynamic. And again, I don't know if this is the whole of it, the sum of it, or whether it's worthy of some exploration, is that going back to the question that you mentioned right at the beginning about someone who's going to interview me, who said, where are the female teachers? I mean, we know they're around. Again, we can name names, but we don't need to. But perhaps so it always slightly surprises me when somebody says that, but I can see what they're saying. And perhaps that has something to do, and he's talking about visibility, really. Perhaps that has something to do with sometimes there's one thing to awaken and to move from that, and perhaps that turns into being a spiritual teacher. I'm talking about as a female, and then there's being exposed, being visible in the world, which has a worldly aspect to it, whether it's through social media, whether it's through being online, whether it's through being in the public. That has a certain, what shall I call it? That has a certain dynamic to it, in the sense of being visible. You're being exposed to being, let's say, judged, categorized, and compared, and so on, by the public, by people who don't necessarily know you or know the essence of the teaching. And that is actually, for some, a scary place, and one that may be subconsciously retreated from or avoided. So in that sense, we're kind of entering, if you like, to be visible, one enters the world, and the world, because of its historical and cultural dynamics of masculine and feminine in the way that we've been speaking about more historically, may not support the
I know
you know what I'm saying, the feminine way, which has less drive, push, ambition, strength of
Authority,
persona.
yes.
Yeah, strength of persona. That's what I'm saying. And I know that for myself, in the sense that the persona, even though people might not see it this way, the persona actually is not strong, or hasn't been. It's been quite fragile. So the fear of exposure, the fear of being misunderstood, so on. Yeah, there's a certain vulnerability or fragility in that. So, but in service to the light of being, all of that has been moved through and continues to be moved through. So it's not an impediment. Yeah, but I would say that for some women, especially in the more contemporary sense, because they haven't come from a worldly, a lot of awakened individuals these days are artists of some sort. They have a poetic nature or an artistic nature. They don't come from the world of commerce or public kind of interface. So to then come into the public arena, which is how others will see you, otherwise how will they know about you and the teaching, that has a certain impact. You know, so I think that plays a part in it as well.
I've seen it. I've seen it, because what I hear you describing is that people, once you stick your head out, as it were, you know, as a teacher or something, and then you become projected upon quite easily of the somewhat unconscious cultural belief systems, that are embedded in society, that each one carries to a greater or lesser extent. And usually what you're pointing to is the judgment of the female, which is, how dare she? Who does she think she is? You know, what gives you the right? We've had this one before. You know, where do you get your authority? Which is pretty much a who do you think you are, you damn woman, you shouldn't be sticking yours as a man's job, kind of, you know, to put it simply and bluntly. You know, we've seen that and we've heard that, and it's and the thing that I was going to get to is that often a man's way of dealing with that kind of threat is by overcoming it, by overpowering it, so the ego gets bigger than it.
That's right.
Yeah, and we've seen this a million times. You see it in life. Yeah, so politics is that. Yeah, but also religion is that. You overcome it by, no one will question my authority, or whatever it is.
That's right.
Is that a woman's way? Is the question, because I would say that knowing women and knowing you and being around this kind of thing, that women are inherently much more open in the sacral center, and so don't have quite that capacity to overcome. They're not really in that way. They can deal with it. It's not to say they're weak. In fact, it's the opposite. But because we're living in the masculine world where everybody's trained into the masculine world, we're all conditioned into the same world, guys. Yeah, that it's like there's a bit of a clash there. And so in the face of that kind of conflict, what is the answer? Retreat.
Yes, that's right. Yes, I think that goes on, and I think that's a hidden sort of behind the scenes energetic kind of dance that goes on, that only when you're in it do you actually kind of really sense what's going on there. And that's just the way it is.
Yeah, I would say that I've seen you. I've seen you actually. Excuse me, one time when I wasn't actually there, but I know that this kind of thing happened. It was a questioning of your authority, if you like. Yeah, it was somewhere abroad in Europe or somewhere, and I remember that I think you allowed it in a true woman's way to penetrate you without, you know, I don't want to talk too much about the sexual meaning of such things, but you did allow it to penetrate you. You didn't overcome it. You didn't deny it. You allowed it to penetrate you and become a source of great something. I don't know what it was. You'd have to speak to that. And then you came out the next day and you were changed by it, but you had returned, but you hadn't pushed it away. You'd allowed it in and then digested it fully. Yeah. You'd absorbed it into your being without any ownership at all. And that was a beautiful thing. And I've seen this happen with you, which makes you a stronger teacher for it.
I think that's what I mean about sort of allowing the world to penetrate you, or
Yes.
the world to crucify you. Yeah. And in that crucifixion, you really come to know that which is more eternal than anything that people are projecting onto you one way or another. And I think that's what happened. On the personhood level, on the persona or ego level, there's still a self here, I was shattered. I was I don't know if I was insulted, not quite that, but I was shocked. I was hurt. I felt misunderstood. I felt exposed. I didn't know how. Yeah. And yet I allowed that shell to shatter, and not the truth of the questioning of the authority. Yeah. That there was no truth in that, because nobody was trying to take a position of authority. But somehow the brokenness allowed me to go deeper into my vulnerability, but a vulnerability that didn't diminish, but actually brought something else out. So that when I spoke the next day, sort of came from a different place, a deeper place. And there was no questioning of anything. It sort of flowed very beautifully. So these kind of things do serve to deepen us and to bring us into a deeper authority, which doesn't come from any surface authority. So I see the challenges of the world and the exposure, if you like, the sort of pain of that exposure to the crucifixion to actually serve something. Yeah. It doesn't always have to be like that, but it can be like that, especially
can I
initially.
Ask you, I'd like to ask you just not an oblique question, but it's relevant to this in a way, because when you're speaking in that way, I feel Jesus, not you. I feel Jesus. This image or this metaphor of Jesus, and I'd just like to ask you personally, what Jesus means to you. What's that? How does that speak to you?
I see. I don't see it. I experience, if you like, Jesus not as the human form, the human individuation, because how could I possibly know that, anything about that, other than what's been handed down as stories or conjecture or myth or whatever? I have no idea. But Jesus as the essence, the Christ light, as that which has got the capacity to stand as openness, to stand as undefendedness in the midst of suffering, in the midst of crucifixion, in the midst of
Judgment,
of exposure, and to stand as the light, to stand as undefendedness, and within that to know the eternal that can never be touched or harmed by anything that seems to attack us or harm us on the level of form. But that standing as that has no armoring around it. It's not defended. It's wide open. And I know that. I experienced that in myself in various situations, not as extreme as being on the cross. But I think we each know that. But or have that capacity within us, whether we actually come to truly know it by abiding as that, is not everyone's journey. Certainly not in this lifetime. It may be some other time, but it is an innate potential in each human being. For some, buried underneath so many layers of armoring that there's no chance really of breaking through that. But it is there as a potential. I think when that potential has broken open like a seed, then we are that light. Yeah, that doesn't mean we're always nicey or we're always acting or behaving in ways that others think is Jesus-like. But it's a natural movement from that light, come what may, in any circumstance. That's how I experience the Christ.
And so that is a beautiful blend of what one could loosely call the masculine and the feminine.
Yes.
Because it's neither of them, but it's both of them.
Yes. When absolutely, and that's what I mean about transcending masculine and feminine. I don't mean transcending that way. I mean going beyond to that which is the essence, the essential nature. When again, I've spoken about this in various ways, but the initial awakening that went to the core, to wake up out of a dream self, ego self, was actually the precursor to that was a visceral sort of inner vision journey of the individuated self into more and more subtle realms of presence and openness. And that was acutely sensed, experienced, presence and openness. And the vision that came, the inner understanding, which was also a visual and visceral understanding, was that presence was a masculine quality. The ability to simply be here, to be here. No looking forward, no looking back, just here. And the openness was a feminine quality. An infinite openness, unboundedness that included everything. Nothing was denied in that. But the depth of that recognition was that they were the same. They weren't different. They weren't two separate qualities or separate experiences. They were one and the same experience. And that's what I would call the inner marriage. Once we start talking about it and dissecting it, then we can say that's a masculine quality and that's a feminine quality. And then we can see how that gets sort of diluted into the stereotypes of the masculine, yes, and the feminine, But actually at its core, it's a very gentle and quiet presence and openness that are really two sides of the same coin. But my experience and even the language that came, the expression that came from that, which was something totally unexpected for me, was that this was the marriage of God and Goddess, of the Holy Mother and the Holy Father. This is one and the same. It's the depth of the heart.
Yin and yang.
Yin and yang,
well.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which gives rise then to the whole human being, not the fragmented.
That's right.
Either one, neither the other, and neither God nor human, but both. It's the harmony of all that appears separate or divided.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Wow. And that's very, it's very beautiful. And it's also, heartbreaking on a certain level, because when we look, into coming back to reality, as we bring this to a conclusion, in a sense, when we look at the cold, stark reality of today's world and the history of today's world, and 1 century ago, 2 centuries ago, we see to this being, I see the deranged masculine that's become a sort of megalomaniac narcissist, in a sense, consumed by its own egoic arrogance without any capacity to to know or even be willing to go towards the kind of things that you're talking about, that feeling nature, the openness. It's very much about closedness, and closedness is all about control. You know, and we've been seeing the rolling out of this unconscious movement for really so many hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years that, you know, there's a sense, I truly believe, because if we're having this conversation, we're not the only ones having this conversation. This conversation is happening. And my hope, in a way, I see the movement, the voice is shifting. Yeah. I mean, men, the masculine cannot go on. We're seeing what's happening in, I come back to seeing what's happening in places like Iran at the moment, where women are rising up and being willing, they're willing to kind of say, you can't take us all this time. You can't do this to us all this time. You've done this before. And we, you know, and something is happening. Something is changing. And I see the articulation of this, you know, guided by women, guided by the feminine, guided by the feminine, both feminine within men who can get to it, who can reach it. It's not a disempowered, weak place. It's a very strong place. Your voice is one of the strongest I've heard. Yeah, it's not a weak woman's voice. It's a very strong voice. It's just that it stands for love. Yeah, it puts love highest of a value, not lowest. It's, you know, and you know, I feel strongly, very strongly about this. And there has to be a movement in this. And I think you're speaking to it. And I think all of the women who are coming along now are interested in it and wanting some of that authority. So authority has been stolen from the feminine. So how have we done here?
Well, I hope we've done good.
We've sort of moved around it a little bit.
Yes, yes, there are many facets to this, but I hope that's inspired some deeper self-reflection.
I know that, you know, sorry, I do apologize for interrupting, but you know, for myself as a man, I know that, you know, listening to you and being with you and diving into my own, let's call it feminine nature, which I think, you know, 20 years ago, I was terrified of what I felt and spent my whole life in avoidance. And it's never, it was worse then than it is now. And now just, there is no resistance to the feeling nature.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that, you know, in spite of, or as well as in addition to everything that we're exploring, I have a sort of non-identification with being female.
Yeah.
And yet an absolute acceptance that there is a female individuation, a form. So it does take care of its femaleness just naturally. It can't help itself. It's not going to pretend to be something else or deny it by shaving its head or whatever it might be. So everything, all forms are what they are. They just are themselves. This form is itself. Your form is itself. But in my, you know, what am I? I don't think of myself as woman in the world or not in the world, or in relationship or not in relationship. I don't think of myself as that. I don't see myself as that. There's just beingness expressing itself in whatever way, or moving in whatever way is just natural. So there's no self-referencing. How am I going to get ahead in a male world, or how am I going to? I just don't see it that way. There's no comparison. There's no agenda there whatsoever. There's no stereotypes, and you know, there are times when I might appear to be, I don't know what I appear to be, you know, more masculine and more feminine. None of that. It doesn't matter.
Well, I don't think of you as, I don't
You
know how I
me
think
as
of
a
you.
woman either.
I just think you're just extraordinary. I just thank God, whatever that God is, grace, that I, you know, that divine providence brought the two of us together. For whose benefit, I just really don't know. But I don't see you as I just see you as a divine being who happens to be, you know, appear as a woman. But I, you know, it's like you're gorgeous and you're a woman, and you know, it doesn't really sort of, every day you blow my mind in some kind of way, shape or form. So that both of us in some way have transcended in the best possible way, I think, or the nicest possible way, the most real sort of way, any of this stuff and nonsense. We're just kind of consciousness having a good time in some ways.
It's
Trying
just
to get through this existence.
Yin and yang. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, well, that's enough guffawing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for listening. We hope it's entertained you in some sort of way and spoken, you know, to the man that you are or the woman that you are, and the essence of it is to explore and find the wholeness, really, isn't it? To the end of division. At the end of the divided self, and we start to see a new world building itself around us, because this is all a fiction of the divided self, ultimately. Yeah. So that's where we're going with this. Really, it's not really about anything else. Many blessings to you. Thank you very much for joining us. We're off to the kitchen, actually, I think. Amoda? Oh, of course, maybe not. And we'll see you again soon. Thanks so much for listening or watching, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.